Hello and bonjour. Welcome to the Grief Show.
We are Project Power Global, a youth-led organization on a mission to advocate for quality education around the globe.
We are passionate about climate change, human rights, and mental health, which is why we are excited to welcome you to the 2023 Grief event.
You are in for an hour-long event where we will get to hear from experts, celebrities, storytellers, and most importantly, youth. Together, we are here to destroy stigmas related to.
This hour is for you. It's for me. And it's for us. Because let's face it, grief is real. And it's a part of our everyday lives.
In big and small ways. Sometimes we notice and sometimes we don't.
With the mental health crisis on the rise across North America, it's never been more important for us to come together and learn how to be there for ourselves and for our community. Education is a powerful tool we know can help.
Hello everyone and welcome to the 2023 Grief Initiative Show, brought to you in partnership by Unsinkable and Project Power Global. My name is Arissa Roy and I'm the founder of Project Power Global as well as a member of the Unsinkable team. More importantly though, I will be your host for today. Before anything, I'd like to acknowledge that Tikaranto, or more commonly known as Toronto, the area I'm joining you in from, is built on sacred land that is part of an agreement between Indigenous peoples and extended to allied nations to peacefully and respectfully care for it. From coast to coast, I acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all Inuits, Métis, and First Nations peoples that call this country home. I reflect on and acknowledge the devastating effect of residential schools and colonialism on Indigenous families and pledge to regularly consider how I play a role in reconciliation and action. In addition, I acknowledge the continued inequalities and injustices impacting the Indigenous populations of Canada. Thank you for listening to my land acknowledgement, and I encourage you all to take a moment to recognize the land that you are joining in from. If you don't know which territory you are in, use the link on the screen to find out. Okay, so we are all gathered here on this online space as a way to show up and to connect in our belief that we are all one big community. Today, we are here to end stereotypes, support our peers, have a good time, and be inspired to take action in supporting our personal mental health as well as the mental health of others. So, get excited. We are so lucky to be joined by artists, experts, and youth to tackle the topic of grief and ensure we all have the tools to navigate it, no matter how it shows up in our lives. Today, we have two panels planned for you, one covering trauma and loss, and the other discussing life transitions. In addition, we have special video messages from youth across Canada and a performance from a very talented group of young people. But you'll have to wait till the end of the show to see that. You won't want to miss it. Now, before we begin, we have a special message from Silken Lauman, founder of Unsinkable.
Hi, I'm Silken Lauman, founder of Unsinkable and Unsinkable Youth. Our youth community has decided to focus on grief this month because they're recognizing that so many young people are actually struggling with grief because of COVID and the fallout of COVID, not just losing people that they love, which of course is incredibly traumatic and difficult, but also losing the experiences, sometimes of childhood, sometimes of young adulthood, the sports, the connection to community. And additionally, I think living in a world that is increasingly full of conflict. So we're going to focus on grief this month to talk about giving it space, how important it is not to stuff down grief. We're going to, look at different strategies and different ways of supporting each other when we're grieving. So I hope you enjoy the content that we're producing this month, and I really welcome you to our Unsinkable community.
Canada's youth are in crisis. Constant exposure to social media, coupled with the global pandemic, has helped make suicide the second leading cause of death among our youth. 1 in 5 Canadian teenagers consider suicide, and yet 4 out of 5 don't get the mental health support they need. But they are online. We see this as an opportunity to meet them where they are. We take a unique, youth-centric approach that, under the guidance of advisors, creates a community where young people can connect and help one another. Unsinkable Youth has powerful and proven digital storytelling and youth-to-youth programs that bring mental health support directly to those who need it most. With community support initiatives across social and online platforms, we help youth bridge the gap between struggling with their mental health and taking steps to well-being. Please join us in helping to support our youth on their positive mental health journey.
Silken, thank you so much for your words and for creating this incredible platform for us to share our stories. And as she mentioned, we hope that by the end of today, you feel unsinkable. Now, speaking of being unsinkable, I'd like to pass the mic to someone who I believe embodies this word and has an important message for us.
Hi everyone, my name is Joshua, and we as youth have been through a lot over the last few years since the COVID-19 pandemic first started. And that's completely okay. It's okay to take time to step back, to think about something a little bit more, or even to take time to grieve about an issue. And on the same matter, it's okay to take time to talk to a family member, or talk to a friend, or someone else who you trust in your life about what you may be feeling and what you may be experiencing. And that's really what today's all about, coming together through shared collective stories of grief and sharing our own experiences with each other. It's okay now to remember how far we've come and how much more stuff we're able to accomplish in sharing our own stories and in sharing our grief with others.
Thank you, Joshua. I think you made an extremely powerful point about how telling our story can be very liberating for many of us. In fact, a year ago, when the PPG and Unsinkable teams came together and were chatting about this initiative, I shared the reason why it means so much to me. And that reason is because of how grief impacted my life almost 2 years ago when my grandmother, or as we say in my culture, Nanima, passed away. At the time, I did not feel like I had the right tools to support me throughout this process of loss. And that's why we wanted to put together this show so you all have the space and the tools. Now, you may be wondering, why would an organization like Project Power Global, who advocates for education, would want to work on a project like this? Well, as Nelson Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. As we know, 1 in 5 Canadian youth struggle with mental illness, which is why it is so important that we advocate to increase mental health resources. The only way that this can happen is by educating people about the issue and the need. And today we are doing just that. Throughout the Grief Initiative project, we are so fortunate to work with York University's research department in order to lead with education. Today, we are so lucky to have 2 of their incredibly knowledgeable researchers and professors, as well as a current student, to speak with us on our panels. For the first panel, we have Dr. Kathleen Fortune and Gemma Maxey from York, who will be joined by Micah Dewani as our youth storyteller. But before we dive into this incredible convo, we have to be completely ready. So let's all take a mindful moment to recenter ourselves.
To begin, sit down comfortably, close your eyes, and draw the shoulders away from the ears. Take a big deep breath in through the nose, filling up the belly rather than the chest. Before exhaling, hold the breath for 3 seconds. Then, as slow as you can, begin to exhale slowly through the mouth. From there, we'll repeat once again. Breathe in through the nose, filling up the belly rather than the chest. Hold the breath for 3 seconds. As slow as you can, begin to exhale through the mouth. Thank you for taking this mindful moment with us. Let's get back to the show.
I don't know about all of you, but I feel so much better and so pumped for our first panel. Side note, meditation and mindfulness has been incredibly important in my personal mental health journey. Can you relate? If so, let us know in the comment section on this live. Now, I am so excited to welcome you all to meet Micah. Micah, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. I'm honored to be a part of this event, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
We are so happy to have you. And for anyone who might not know who Micah is, he is aware of many hats as he is an author, coach, mentor, and producer, to name a few. At 21 years old, Micah has established himself as a multifaceted creative, using his platform and work to advocate for social issues that is close to his heart. Like many of us, Micah has experienced trauma and loss, and at the same time has shown great resilience, something that we can all learn from. Micah, we are so happy to have you and for everyone to hear your story.
Yeah, so should I get into a bit of my background now?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, yeah. So as panel one is about trauma and loss, I started to think about my experiences around those subjects. And I realized that I think I've experienced trauma and loss kind of on three different levels. I think first was the personal family level. The first time I ever lost somebody close to me was a childhood friend of mine who passed when I was 11, who passed of drug overdose, something that I didn't know anything about. So at the time, I was just blown away. And that was kind of my introduction to what it meant to grieve, what it meant to lose, what it meant to deal with trauma. I think as I got a little bit older, I had to explore those themes once again. I grew up playing sports and unfortunately lost one of my teammates. And then right before the pandemic, I lost my grandmother. And then during the pandemic, I lost one of my close childhood friends as well. So it's a theme that from a personal and family level has always kind of influenced my life. But then I think as well, trauma and loss doesn't necessarily always have to deal with death. And like I said, I grew up as an athlete. And at 15, I was forced to give up my career due to a couple of medical issues. The most serious was a heart problem that led to collapsing episodes and just moments where it was literally life and death. And so I had to give up my career. And so I spent a lot of time grieving the loss of part of my identity as an athlete. I think if you're an athlete, you know you're so deeply rooted in the sport that it's hard to lose that part of you. And I think the third level of my experience has been kind of a communal sense of grieving. I live in Broward County, Florida, in the United States. And for most people, you're probably like, I don't know what that is. But it's the county where the Stoneman Douglas tragedy happened in 2018. It's about 10 minutes from me. I didn't personally go to the school, but it's 10 minutes from my school. And I remember the day so specifically because I have family, I have friends that live in that community that attended that school. And it's a definition of unexpected. I think in the aftermath of that tragedy, my whole community came together, but we all were experiencing mourning and experiencing loss. And if we're going to talk about trauma, that's definitely the definition of that. So I think those are kind of the three levels that I've experienced trauma and loss on, which it can be seen as a negative. But I think speaking to this event and why we're here today, it really just shows me that young people go through real things. And I think sometimes older people think, oh, you're fine. All you have to do is go to school and watch Nickelodeon and, you're just a kid. And that's true. I mean, we do have that childlike wonder and, we get to do fun things, but young people do go through real things. And I think my life is a testament to that. And so I think it's important to have events like these so we can discuss grief and discuss trauma and discuss loss.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story so vulnerably and openly today. I think that speaks to kind of what we're trying to do with this environment, support each other through collective storytelling and sharing. So thank you for bringing up some really important points. And I think this is a perfect segue to welcome our two other panelists to join this chat about trauma and loss. So from York University, we have Dr. Kathleen Fortune and Gemma Maxey. So Dr. Kathleen is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at York University. She's received her PhD in psychology from the University of Manitoba in 2015, completing her doctoral thesis on the psychological, physical, and emotional costs of concealing a stigmatized identity. She is passionate about destigmatizing conversations around death and loss such that young people have safe spaces like this to share their experiences and to find comfort and support. Joining her, we have Jama, who is a passionate Afro-Indigenous student who takes pride in breaking the cycle. In 2020, Jama graduated with academic honors at Georgian College for the Social Service Worker program. Additionally, he received the Exemplary Learner Award on graduation. Currently, he is a third-year psychology student enrolled in a specialized honors thesis program. Jama also works as an addiction counselor at Addiction Rehab Toronto while he continues his education. Jama's academic goals are to continue his education to a PhD level in a clinical psychology program. Wow, both of your bios are so interesting and so amazing. How are you, Kathleen and Jama? How are you feeling right now?
Good. Thanks for the wonderful intro. I think it spoils me a little bit, but thank you for that.
Yeah. Awesome. So our viewers have just had the opportunity to learn more about Micah's story. And I think this is a great point for us to kind of explore what trauma and loss is and how it can present itself in young people. So Kathleen, I'm going to throw this first question to you. Can you maybe tell us, what does trauma and loss mean? Could you potentially define it and share how this can lead to grief in individuals, especially youth? And perhaps what are studies and research showing at this point in terms of how the pandemic has left young people with grief due to this unexpected, probably in many cases, traumatic event?
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Lots of things to talk about. I think Micah's story already sort of gave me a great segue into this whole conversation. So when we talk about loss, we often talk about it as if it's synonymous with death only. But as Micah notes, it's not just about death. Of course, those are significant losses. But really, when we think about loss, I want all of us to reflect on what we value, what's meaningful, what we love in our life, and whether those things are gone from our life or we can't access them anymore. Any of those things would represent a loss. So, for example, the ending of a relationship, whether that's a friendship or a romantic partnership, that's a loss. The loss of a pet, those of you that are pet lovers like myself, that's a huge loss, and often one that's disenfranchised and doesn't get the level of support in society that it should. Loss of a job, right? Loss of identity, as Micah spoke to. Loss of a dream or a goal that you're invested in and you've been working toward, right? That's another loss. And the subsequent loss of identity that comes along with all of those losses. And then maybe even on a higher level, the ambiguous loss of this pandemic, right? This constant lack of predictability of not knowing what tomorrow or 6 months from now or the future is going to look like. That's also a loss. So really, if it meant something to you, if it's valuable to you and it's no longer part of your life or you can't access it, that's a loss. So I think that's a great way to start. Trauma is a difficult one to define, and you're not going to find one, agreed upon definition. But I like the definition offered by Dr. Gabor Mate, sort of one of my professional heroes. And he talks a lot about how trauma is not what happened to you. So it's not the traumatic event itself. It's actually what happened inside of you as a result of what happened to you. So it's an important distinction, I think, to make. And if we think about trauma, we can think of it as this kind of underlying invisible force that we're often unaware of, and it's infiltrating how we see ourselves. It's getting in the way of how we love other people, how we make sense of the world. And when we talk about trauma, we're often talking about things like abuse and natural disasters and really, really big events. But I want us to think about COVID as potentially representing both of those things for many people watching today, right? If you lost someone you loved during COVID, and because of the required distancing, you couldn't be with them, or you had to say goodbye on a tablet, that's undoubtedly, a traumatic event. But also for 3 years, we've been bombarded by news broadcasts about COVID deaths and lockdowns and this sort of looming uncertainty. That's a form of sort of vicarious trauma as well. So kind of trying to tie these two things together quickly. Some losses, as Micah noted, are traumatic and some are not, but losses are still difficult regardless of whether they represent a form of trauma as well or initiate trauma. Your second part of that question, Arissa, is a big one, right? And so I'm going to put a caveat, which is that loss is a universal experience, but grief or grief response is very much an individual experience. So not all youth, and I'm sure Jalma can speak to this as well, not all youth are going to have the same experience of the pandemic or the same grief response. And when I think about how it uniquely impacts youth, I think about what's happening in adolescence, right? So much change. You've got like biological and sexual maturation happening. You've got changing social relationships, more pressure, more responsibility, this attempt to carve out your own individual identity, all of that stuff. And then boom, you got dropped in the middle of a pandemic, right? And everything was changed immediately overnight. So it made an already difficult transition to adulthood that much more challenging for so many youth. And so there's ongoing literature or research, I should say, about what the impact of COVID has been on youth. And we'll see that impact in a couple of years, probably, Arissa. But sort of broad strokes, we've seen increases in depression, we've seen increases in anxiety, issues with sleep, disordered eating, like all of these things. And these have been felt particularly by young women, the research would say. And so I think we can view these as sort of grief responses, right? The pandemic is not a normal experience. It's a very traumatic, cataclysmic, abnormal experience. And it makes complete sense that any of us, and youth in particular, would have these grief responses in response to the losses, the many losses they faced.
Wow, I feel like that was a packed answer, but I gave you quite a jam-packed question as well. You noted something quite interesting. You said that studies are showing more, I guess, response within women. Is there more like reasoning, or can you maybe share a little bit more about that?
I mean, the authors would suggest that part of that is that they took on more responsibilities in the home. So many people ended up being stuck, having younger siblings also in the home. And that responsibility typically, unfortunately, falls along gender lines. And that's sort of the hypothesis. But I think there are probably there's more than one explanation for that. We know also that young women tend to report, engage in a bit more self-report around these kinds of feelings. But that was the hypothesis, was that they took on more of the like parental caregiving roles in their homes.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And I think talking about the difference of gender roles can also bring up this conversation on how different communities, cultural communities, kind of experience grief differently as well. So Gemma, I have this next question for you. Could you maybe expand on how different communities are affected by different sort of types of loss, and what barriers are in place to certain groups like compared to others, and how can we best support these communities?
Yeah, certainly. I think the key to this is that just like every individual, every cultural group is different, right? You would never say that two individuals are the same or two cultural groups are the same, right? And I just want to first acknowledge the land acknowledgement at the beginning. I'm a Nakota First Nations. I'm also African, so I have a biracial identity. So I think that's very unique and something that I bring to the table in terms of my lived experience. And first, I just want to mention the ongoing crisis with First Nations people in this country. In 2016, Census Canada released data that they are 3 times more higher at risk of suicide than the non-Indigenous population. And it doesn't take a genius to see this if you actually go to reservations on Canada. My reservation in Saskatchewan, there's a crisis, right? And that's the reality of it. I don't think a lot of Canadians are even aware to this crisis that happens, kind of under the radar, so to speak, until we really talk about these issues on days like Truth and Reconciliation Day. I'll share something personal because I believe in the art of vulnerability, and that is something that's very close to me. And so I have 2 uncles that went to residential schooling, and they both died by suicide. And that's part of my story when I think of my journey in education and, the fact that they aren't here and having the opportunities that I have tonight to speak. So I always keep them close to my heart and in my story. And also I would say, to my other side, the Black community as well, when I talk to my friends in the Black community, something that happens a lot is we don't, especially males, we don't talk about our traumas and our loss. And I hate that about my community, and I hate that that stigma behind, I have depression, I have anxiety. Those are all real emotions. And I think that for some communities, it's really hard to open up to, right? If I go to the barbershop right now and I'm getting my hair cut and I'm trying to talk about depression or anxiety, chances are a lot of guys are going to look at me weird. But I think the biggest thing is it's okay to not be okay. And not always do I have to base my feelings on what someone thinks of me. When I was younger, I thought so much of what people thought of me. So now it's just, finding those right people, finding people that you can open up to. Dr. Fortune is someone who I actually feel comfortable as maybe a safe space for me to open up to and talk to. You'll find people, professors, coaches, different people in your life, mentors, that you're going to find that safe space ultimately to go to if you're going through a hard time. And I think that's so important. And just supporting these communities. I think those one-on-one conversations is the best things that we can do at an individual level, speak to these people in these communities, right? Like the First Nations people, I don't know if you guys have First Nations friends, but if you talk to them, my experience, I'll tell you, is not unique. What's happened with my uncle is what happened with my life, and the different losses that these community, it's so normalized. It's just, it's something that we as individuals, we need to go out and seek that knowledge, because obviously things like media and stuff don't always provide us that best knowledge. So, seeking that knowledge through one-on-one relationships, right? That's how we ultimately get truth. And that's what I believe reconciliation is. And so I think, just to my point earlier, that all different communities are different. And one of the communities that I want to stress here tonight is, when I was younger, I used to think that, people who have money or have privilege don't, they don't have these emotions when they've experienced trauma and loss. And I'll tell you, that is so not true. I work as an addiction counselor now, and I work with some people that are fairly wealthy. And let me tell you that when you have a family member that is lost because of a reason that you can't control, it doesn't matter how much money's in your bank account. It affects everyone equally. And that's something that I was very naive about when I was younger, coming from my neighborhood and where I grew up in poverty and things. I didn't realize that, I believe it's sometimes even harder for these people to get over the loss, because from the outsides, you see their shiny outsides, but you can't see their hurting insides. And that's a very hard thing to deal with. And I completely validate in anyone who sometimes feels, because they have this kind of lifestyle, that it's, everything's supposed to be put together. I'm telling you right now, it's okay to not feel okay. So.
Again, I'm so appreciative of everyone's vulnerability and sharing so much about our own personal story. Gemma, I think you spoke so tremendously well about how different people experience different things, but at the end of the day, this kind of mental health and the experience and the challenges is universal, and there's nothing more to it. And I think that kind of transitions to my next question for you as well. How can youth recognize if they're experiencing these emotions or grief or whatever it is, and what would you say are some important first steps for youth to take as you're navigating this?
Yeah, most definitely. This is a really good question, actually, because a lot of the times, if you're experiencing trauma or loss for the first time, you may be unaware of the symptoms that your body may give you, right? It may just look like something like you're not sleeping normally. Like, you're on YouTube till 4 a.m. and you can't wake up. It may be that you're not eating properly. It may be that you don't find enjoyment in activities that you used to find enjoyment in. So it could be your hobbies, right? So say you enjoy snowboarding, skiing, and you go snowboarding, skiing with your friends, and you can't even find enjoyment in that. Those are real tail signs of something's not going on. Something good is not going on, sorry. And so reading your body in that way is so important, right? We always have to be mindful of what our body's telling us, right? It doesn't always look like some extreme, schema of what depression looks like for a person to experience depression or loss. I believe, it can happen at a smaller level. And those things can easily be overlooked if we're not paying attention, being mindful of our body and how we feel throughout the day and our daily activities. I just want to share one story because, again, I do, value my lived experience and stuff like that, and why it's so important for people to have platforms to talk on these things. So it was last July 1st, on Canada's Day, not the one July 1st, 2021. And I was hanging with my mom and my older brother, and we were just going to watch the fireworks and whatnot. And I just finished my first year of university, so of course I'm like super excited. The first person in my family to ever, go to university or anything, any post-secondary in that case. And there was a shooting that happened beside the building beside me, and as the guys were running to their getaway car, they started shooting at me and my family. And for the next 20 seconds, it was kind of like a movie. I would say, we're just kind of dodging bullets. And during this, I got hit by a ricocheting bullet, and my mom got hit. And so that was extremely traumatic. And there's a facet of amount of trauma that I experienced that night that by having those experiences and then being able to share that and being finding safe people. I actually reached out to Kathleen when that happened, and I told her, because she made me feel safe. So what had happened that night and kind of how I'm going to plan on continuing my education, because it was extremely hard, right? To be honest, just to go outside at dark, like when it was dark out, I was always kind of scared. So again, I love this saying, it's okay to not be okay. And I think the first step really is acknowledging that you're not okay, right? And when you're looking for help, the first step is to accept that there's a problem, right? There's a problem. Like for me, when this incident happened, I had to accept that there was something not functioning properly in my life. I couldn't walk my dog at nighttime because I was scared of the dark, right? So I needed to reach out for help. And a lot of the times, I think there's this kind of like, I would say this notion where like you have to see a clinical psychiatrist to heal all your problems, which, as we know, is very expensive and not everyone can afford that. In my experience, some of the best people that have helped me with my traumas and loss have just been counselors, people like myself, who is just a counselor. It doesn't have to be a certain profession or clinician that needs to help you, right? And when these emotions and stuff come up, doesn't matter the level of clinician that's helping you. The big thing is that you're being vulnerable and you're bringing your best self to these sessions, right? And if you're reaching out for help, there's so many things that can benefit a person from therapy. And I really think that stigma of, I don't need to go to therapy because I got this. There's nothing wrong with going to therapy. There's nothing wrong with getting help. There's nothing wrong with admitting that you have trauma, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong. So the first step is to accept it.
I think that's incredibly powerful. Radical acceptance is something that I talk a lot about in terms of not just with, mental health, but just in general. I feel like there's a lot of times when it's really hard to admit to some of these things that we struggle with. And I think that's why conversations like this, and Gemma, how vulnerable you were sharing with all of us, like that's what we need. We need more of that to make space for these conversations. So thank you so much again. And I want to pass it over to Micah, because you shared a little bit more about your story and how you experienced trauma and loss in different ways in your life. And I'm really curious to know, do you have a message to share with youth who may have just recently experienced an unexpected loss and don't really know where to start? Do you have anything to encourage them on what to do next?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, sometimes when you experience a loss, you feel like you're lying in a pool of uncertainty. And I feel like it's okay to lie there. It's okay to feel like you're struggling or you're confused or overwhelmed. I think everything you're feeling is within the spectrum of human emotions. And it doesn't make sense for us to act like life is always going to be positive. I think we do have to embrace the hardship and the reality of going through things like that. But I do think, and this is from my personal life, if you can try to find the emotional specificities in how you're feeling, you'll be able to move forward easier. I have this analogy, like when I was in pre-calculus in high school, and I would have to do a large problem where you had to solve several steps. If my end number was like just way off, but I didn't know which step I took that was incorrect, I wouldn't know how to fix the end number. So I think in the end goal of healing, if you can identify first the emotional specificities of how you're feeling. Am I struggling because I have survivor's remorse? Do I feel like I didn't get to end a conversation on a good note with somebody? Do I feel like my life is over because X, Y, and Z happened? If you can first identify that emotional specificity, and it's hard, you have to self-reflect. You have to talk to people. You have to, you can listen to your favorite songs and kind of reflect. You can journal. If you have the resources, you can go to therapy. But if you spend that time reflecting and try to find those specifics, you'll then know how to move forward, and you'll then know how to help yourself. So I think that's like the first thing you should do. And it's okay if it takes time. I'm personally a very slow processor. It'll take me months sometimes, and then I'll be like, oh, I felt like this because of this. So it's okay if it takes you time, but I do think it's important to really work on that.
I love that. So from what I just heard, I think time and really trying to figure out what you're feeling are really helpful. I hope those two tips help our audience today. And I just want to say, is there any other comments from the floor? I know, Kathleen, we heard from you earlier, but do you have anything else you'd like to share on trauma and loss?
I mean, I think they've covered so much, and I want to build on Micah's point, this idea, there's this famous saying by Dr. Susan David that discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. Okay, and we don't mean discomfort means you have to have traumatic events, but it's not always going to be easy, and it's not always going to be happiness. But sometimes we learn from these difficult moments by doing exactly what Micah said, right? Taking the time to self-reflect and to recognize that it is a process, it's a journey, and it's not going to happen overnight. So I think that's great advice.
I love it. Amazing. Okay, so Kathleen, Micah, and Gemma, thank you so much for this chat. I think when I reflect on the grief I've experienced throughout my life, these tips would have been really comforting for me throughout that, and I know they will be into the future. So thank you so much for this conversation, and we hope that everyone who's watching today and who watches this later can take something away from this. Amazing. Okay, so to transition, when we were planning for this show, one of the things I remember discussing was how do we recognize the spectrum of grief that is experienced throughout life? If we take a moment to really think about it, there are so many times in our lives that there's situations and things that happen that are not expected, or perhaps bring up something that we didn't even know was coming. And life transitions are, at the end of the day, quite inevitable and something that we all have to deal with. However, many of us can doubt how they can cause grief in our lives, which is what we will be exploring today in our second panel, who will be joined with Dr. Kathleen, who is returning, as well as her colleague, Dr. Janine Rwana, and our youth storyteller for this segment, Angelica. Before that, though, we have an amazing message from an unsinkable human, Michaela Brewer.
Hey everyone, my name is Michaela and I am an Unsinkable community champion, and I experienced grief when my therapist died by suicide in 2020. That prompted a type of pain that I don't think anyone can be prepared for, and I will honestly say that I am sometimes more ashamed of how I coped with those feelings rather than the fact that they were there. And so I healed and realized that I was unsinkable when I recognized that we all experience this storm of grief in the open water, but not all of us have the same tools or the same boat to navigate that storm. So I've learned to have patience in my responses and coping mechanisms. And I understand now that hope and faith in a way with, rather than a way forward and through. as a suicide loss survivor doesn't necessarily ask you to fully understand. It just asks you to believe. And I think belief can transcend time when time struggles to heal.
Thank you so much, Michaela, for sharing your story. And I personally love that analogy you shared with us about how we can all experience storms of grief in our lives, but not all of us have the same boat to navigate it. And for me, that's why this event is so important, because it's open to anyone and everyone, which is why I want to take this moment to speak to our audience and say, if there's anyone you think should be watching this with you, feel free to share the link and share it on social media so that we can get more people part of this conversation. All right, now I am so happy to welcome to the floor Angelica Galuzzo. Angelica, how are you feeling?
I'm good. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we are. I remember just reading about your story and being so excited to be able to share this spotlight with you and learn more from your experiences. But before that, anyone who might not know Angelica, she is a mental health advocate largely motivated by her own struggles with mental illness. In 2021, she started her own podcast called The Revolutionized Mind, with the goals of providing a safe space for people to share their stories, improving education around well-being, raising awareness about various mental health illnesses, and learning how to embrace true authenticity. Since then, Angelica has connected with people from all over the world and has built a platform that she's quite proud of. She loves the quote, "There's always light at the end of the tunnel, even if you can't see it right away." I love that quote so much. Thanks for sharing that with us. So yeah, Angelica, we want to hear your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for that intro. I am just really happy that we're doing a panel on life transitions in relation to the topic of grief, because I feel like when most people hear the word grief, they always just assume that it's about death and loss, which of course is valid. I've experienced that type of loss myself, so I know how hard that can be. But the fact that we can experience grief through the loss of other things, life transitions, is also completely valid. So I hope that my story will help to highlight that today. And I wanted to share a little bit about my own athletic journey, as I believe that that really demonstrates how we can experience grief through the loss of something other than death. So just as a quick background for those listening, I started playing soccer when I was about 3 years old and quickly developed a strong passion for the game. As I got older, competition grew stronger. I would be the one spending countless hours outside training, making sure that I was in the best possible shape and ready to perform to the best of my ability. So between my natural talent and all the internal motivation that I had, I knew I had potential to take my game to the next level. I ended up working my way up to a spot on the provincial team. I won 2 national championships and earned a full ride scholarship to a Division I school in the United States. But it was not all sunshine and rainbows. I was faced with a great deal of adversity when I suffered 5 major knee surgeries in 5 years in the middle of all of these accolades. So to keep all the unfortunate events brief today, I tore my second ACL this summer before I was supposed to begin my collegiate career. Therefore, I came in as the injured kid and was forced to medically redshirt my first year at school. That meant I spent all my time in the training room working my hardest to get back on the field and prove that I deserved to be there. Fast forward, finally, I ended up getting cleared next spring for full contact training for the first time, and I was super happy to finally be on the field. 5 days later, I ended up standing from a chair and I tore my meniscus. So complete fluke accident. Still, I remained positive. I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll just go through recovery again and get back for next season. But then when I got my MRI results, they said that I would need another full surgery and need another 10 months of recovery, meaning that I would have to medically redshirt for the second season in a row. And I could talk for hours about how these things affected me, my mental health, and my overall perception of my athletic identity. But why I actually chose to share this story today is because of the grief it caused me to lose the most important thing in my life time and time again. So after spending my entire childhood working towards this dream and actually getting there, it was devastating to not be able to play. And I ended up making the very tough decision to transfer back home to a school in Ontario after my second year. And that decision was so tough because it wasn't just switching schools or making a decision for my own well-being. It was giving up a lifetime dream. And for the first time in my life, I was forced to reassess my athletic identity and what soccer actually meant to me. So I left out a lot of details in the story for the interest of time, but I just really wanted to use my story to show that grief can be experienced through the loss of things like dreams, passions, and identity.
Thank you so much. I think that a lot of viewers are youth, and many of whom might be athletes and can share in a lot of your experiences. So thank you for that. And I also love how you speak about grief as something on a spectrum, and like how different experiences brought up different sort of feelings for you throughout your journey. So I think this is a really exciting time to bring in our two other panelists for the conversation. So we have Dr. Kathleen back with us, and I'm so excited to welcome Janine Rawana, who is our other panelist today. Janine is an associate professor at York University in the Department of Psychology and a clinical developmental psychologist. Her current research interests are in mapping the interactive pathways of risk and protective factors in the developmental processes of youth mental health and the application of these specific findings to school and community-based programs. Her primary research interests are the development of emotion regulation among youth. Welcome to the two of you, Kathleen. It's great to have you back. And Janine, welcome to this conversation. How are you doing? I'm sure you've been kind of listening in the background. Janine, any thoughts just coming to mind right now?
It's very exciting and very humbling. I am by no means an expert. Just listening to all the people here, everybody brings their own expertise to the table. I might bring one small aspect, but it's been very humbling and to hear all the stories people have gone through.
Yeah, I can definitely relate into that feeling. So I would really like to kick off our conversation by talking about how life transitions can cause grief, and what are some examples other than what Angelica's story kind of told us about, but also looking at it in the sense of how can these transitions make us more resilient and stronger as humans.
Sure, Arissa. Thank you very much for those questions. When I was thinking about how life transitions and relate to grief, really it's essentially, in my mind, loss during change. And when we think about young people, compared to any other stage in life, and I think of young people at ages 0 to like 30, that's how we say they're young people. There's constant transitions, anywhere from puberty to going away to school, as Angelica said, starting new schools. It can be high school, university, college, going to work, getting married, new relationships, ending relationships. There's just so much change that happens. And the research would show that for most people, they kind of muddle through that pretty well. But when you think about grief and you add that on top of that, so you add loss, and we heard about loss of identity, loss of passion, loss of a relationship, and that could be through death, or it could just be through the termination of a relationship. All those things can complicate what is a normal kind of emotional time of our lives when we're young. So that's what I think of. Loss during sense of change is really grief and transition. And that can look, as was mentioned earlier, it could be a loss of a pet, it could be loss of a person, it could be loss of your identity. And as I mentioned before, many of us do recover fairly well. And of course, that doesn't mean it's a less challenging experience, but in the long term, we fare fairly well during these transitions. But for lots of different populations, we heard from the Indigenous populations, from maybe Black youth, those populations have been shown to have more challenges, and that could be from low socioeconomic status. It could be from lack of feeling empowered in a situation. It could be lack of resources or access to resources. So there's certain populations or certain times. I think what I've been hearing from this event here is not being able to be your authentic self, not being able to share your emotions in a safe space can lead to more complicated or lead to grief that happens over a long time. A lot of stigma. So sometimes we hear from others, just hurry up and get over it. It's been a year, it's been a month, and that situation has happened when it could take the rest of our lives to get over something. Or maybe you don't ever, maybe you just have a new life that transitions afterwards. Or stress, or really intense feelings that you need to deal with. So all those things can kind of complicate how we experience our grief or how we experience our loss. But I'm happy that you asked about resilience. So there is an opportunity, and for many people, and I definitely have seen it here through our panelists, through the sharing of stories, is that you come maybe even to the potential of being able to share your story and share your lessons learned, which means you become resilient. Resilience has many different transitions, but essentially it means that you've been able to transition to something and you've gotten through it and you become a different person, and ideally you've had some personal growth. So you view transitions and these challenging times that could be complicated by grief as an opportunity to have personal growth, an opportunity to develop your coping methods to deal with the different transitions you're going through. And to be resilient, the research shows that it's 4 different major domains that you can work on to help us become more resilient. And the first one is to really build your personal resources. And that means the things such as being hopeful, and I see the level of hope here, having more gratitude, having humor. Our personal resources, if we can take some time to kind of think about what are they and how can we build them, that actually equates to more resilience later on. Because we know that grief or loss is not going to happen once, but probably numerous times during our lives. So how can we take one situation and learn from it so we're better prepared to deal with the situation that happens afterwards? The other thing we know about resilience is that we can tap into our social resources, and that means connecting with friends and family members who actually improve our well-being, who improve our meaning in life, who improve our purpose of life, and make us feel cared for and allow us to care for others. So being selective, it might mean that we have to have more loss to lose some friendships or lose some family members that we spend a little bit less time with. But in the long run, it actually helps us be more resilient. And this was talked at length here, and I'm so happy to see that, is tapping into your diversity. So I'm Indo-Caribbean, I'm Guyanese background, so that means, although I was born and raised in Canada, but my family is resilient through knowing their culture, knowing their language, knowing what it means. Education is something that's highly valued in a lot of Guyanese families. So what are the things that help you get through that? What helps you get through your experiences by relying on your culture, by relying on the people of your culture? Maybe it's your grandparents that have shared knowledge with you or tell stories with you that help you get through your situations. And finally, the last thing that can help us be more resilient is identifying your strengths. So what do you do well naturally? It's your strengths that get you through a difficult situation, not really your weaknesses. So your strengths could be that you're competent in a sport. That's something that you enjoy doing. It could be that you're honest, you're hardworking, you have a great sense of humor. Maybe you're really good at storytelling, you're good at writing, maybe you're good at art. Maybe you're not good at it, but you're going to try and develop that strength. So all those things, such as tapping into your personal resources, your social resources, your strengths, and just knowing that it takes time. These are not things that you can solve overnight, but in time and seeking the right resources, you can deal with the transition and secondhandly also deal with the grief that you're experiencing.
I love that. And I love what you were kind of sharing about how there's many aspects of resilience and many resources and outlets as well. And how different things in our lives kind of have to come together to support us throughout our journeys. I think it's like kind of like a wonderful fruit salad in a way. Like you have to have all the different parts to make it taste good and successful, I guess. Thank you so much, Janine. So our next question, we've been talking a lot about different struggles and how grief can impact us in many different ways. So Kathleen, I'm wondering, what are some tools that can really help us throughout these life transitions, like tangible tools that we can use?
Tangible tools, absolutely. I think Janine has already articulated several of those, but I'll sort of build on that. I want to start by saying that I think there are some things we can't fully prepare ourselves for in life, right? The things that sort of blindside you on a random Tuesday. There's not a lot I can offer you as a toolkit for those ones. But for the other stuff, for the life transitions, some of which we can see coming and we can prepare for, I want to offer you a few just, suggestions here. And I'm going to start with something that's a little foofy, so bear with me. I want us to start from a place of self-compassion. And the reason I say that is because when I listen to a podcast or I read something, a list of ways to handle difficult periods in my life, sometimes it can actually make me feel worse in the moment. It can feel actually more overwhelming. Like now I can add that to my to-do list of things I have to get through. And so I want us to think about starting from a place of understanding that change is hard. Change is hard for everyone at every age, right? Change is hard. And so be kind to yourself, right? What I mean by that is treat yourself with the same degree of kindness and patience and understanding that you would a friend going through that difficult transition. So starting from that point, Janine already made the point about social connections and sort of building up those social resources. You can call it your tribe, your community, whatever terminology you want to use. I think that's the single best way to approach any difficult life transition. And I think we all could use, a little more time devoted in our life to cultivating and maintaining those relationships. And why is that? Well, those people have your back, right? They listen to you, they validate you, they're there to support you, and you're there to support them when the difficult transitions come, because they will come at all points in your life. So that's one way. I'm going to advocate for carving out space in your life for joy. And again, I'm starting to sound even more foofy as we go along here. But what I mean by that is intrinsically valuable things. We spend so much of our day on stuff that's on the shoulds, oughts, must do's, right? Doing for money, doing to help somebody else, doing for validation, and not enough on what just brings us actual joy, right? So maybe that's going to be exercise, and that'd be a great way to go, right? There's so many benefits to exercise, taking short walks, whatever it might be, but it's going to look different for everyone. It could also just be tuning out with games or music or art or whatever's going to work for you, just something small, because it rejuvenates you to better face the challenges that come down the line. I have 3 more quick ones if I can go on.
Yeah.
Okay, so Janine referenced coping, and certainly, I don't know about you, but I didn't learn coping growing up, right? I feel like it should have been alongside English, math, science, all those other subjects, because we get to adulthood and we don't have really well-developed coping skills, many of us. And I think about, we engage in a lot of avoidance coping, procrastination, distraction, and that sort of helps in the moment. It reduces the anxiety in the moment, but it also just kind of kicks the can down the lane in terms of the problem doesn't go away when you avoid it. It actually gets bigger and the anxiety gets bigger. I'm sure this is familiar to many of us, myself included here. So focusing on problem-focused coping, directly attacking the problem, seeking more information, seeking help to solve the problem will actually get you further ahead. 2 more quick ones, I promise. Routines and rituals. I don't know about you, but during COVID, some of the things that I missed the most were those mundane, everyday rituals that we took for granted, right? And I think those stabilize our day when everything is in just absolute chaos and uncertainty, to have some things that stay the same, some degree of consistency in your day, whatever your daily routine is. Maybe it's just making a fancy coffee, I'm speaking for myself here, or taking a walk, walking your dog, whatever it is for you, keeping something stable when nothing else is stable. And then the last one, I'm going to preach something that I don't personally practice, but for which there's a lot of scientific evidence, and that is meditation and mindfulness or other forms of relaxation techniques. There's a ton of literature now on how that can take down or tampen that sort of stress response that many of us have when we're faced with difficult transitions. It can help us stay present, which is really hard for me, and I'm sure for many other people. I get stuck in the mud of the past, and I get stuck with the looming uncertainty of the future. And I have a hard time focusing on just what's in front of me right now in my life. And so engaging in those practices, maybe it's a free app, whatever it is, trying to incorporate more of that into your life will help you manage the difficult emotions, become a little bit less reactive, better sleep, better attention, all kinds of downstream impacts to meditation or mindfulness. So that's my very rushed toolkit of things that many of us could use.
I love that toolkit. There's like something for everyone in that fruit salad. I'm using the fruit salad analogy again. Okay, so we are running short of time, but I wanted to give the mic back to Angelica because I'm sure, I don't know about you, but like I'm sure you were listening just to all of these things that both Kathleen and Janine were saying, and maybe you can relate to some of these tools that you use throughout your journey. So what is something that was helpful for you throughout all of these transitions and the times that you were injured in your life?
Yeah, Janine and Kathleen both gave such great tips. And I think, like you said, it really just depends on where you're at that day, what situation you're dealing with. Like, it's so great to have all these different coping mechanisms that you can intentionally choose when you need them. I always find myself coming back to two. So the first one being just simply giving yourself space to feel the things that you need to feel, acknowledging that some things do just suck. Like when I stood up out of that chair, that was a really crappy situation and it was such a fluke. So I needed to give myself time to be sad, be mad, go through all the emotions before I can build up my resilience again. And then the second part of that is relating back to my favorite quote, like always finding that light at the end of the tunnel, kind of just using the one thing in your day that you find joyful or peaceful, whatever it is, and like that one positive that you can find. For me, maybe it was spending time in the training room and meeting other athletes because it gave me that opportunity where I wouldn't have been able to do that elsewhere. Maybe it was getting more time to actually build my strength and my body up while doing all my rehab exercises, not necessarily on the field, but just kind of really working with your mentality, using your thoughts to your advantage and kind of just doing what you can to put yourself in a good headspace after going through these difficult times.
Yeah, I really am grateful for you in terms of sharing that, and I think I love what you were saying just about being okay and just accepting it for what it is and not trying to like change it in your mind. I think that's super powerful. Okay, well, thank you so much to the three of you for joining us for this panel. I learned a lot, and I have some exciting life transitions ahead of me in 2023. So I think this toolkit that you all kind of helped me put together and shared with all of us will be really helpful for me down the line. So thank you all so much. All right, so these panels have been incredible, and I feel like we've gained so much information. And I just wanted to kind of spread a little bit more information on other resources that are available to all of you out there today. One of which is Straight Up Health, who we have a video message from.
Hi there, my name is Jake Ernst, and I'm the clinical director at Straight Up Health, which is a teen-focused and family-focused mental health clinic in Midtown Toronto. I'm going to take you through our website to show you the services that we offer. This is our website. You can find us at www.straightuphealth.ca, and I want to show you some of the things that we offer. So we offer therapy, individual, couple, and families. We also offer specific types of therapy. One of the main ones we offer is cognitive behavioral therapy. And we focus on a range of issues that young people and their families are facing. And these are some of the common ones here. So depression, anxiety, trauma, stress, and of course, relationships, and of course, friendships and navigating what it means to be a teen nowadays. We also offer workshops. We do a lot of community education and speaking to schools, speaking to different companies about mental health and about stress. We offer a range of specializations through our team, which you can find at the team tab here. And many of the different members on our team focus on specific issues such as ADHD, executive functioning, anxiety, anything pertaining to some of the challenges that young people are facing, and of course, family-focused therapy. As well, you can get in contact with us on our website. You can call us here, or you can email us directly to book an appointment. You can fill out this form here, or you can email hi@straightuphealth.ca, or admin@straightuphealth.ca is another really easy way to find us as well. Thank you so much for giving us the time to share a little bit about our services, and I wish you all well.
All right, thank you so much to the team at Straight Up Health for sharing about your services and supporting the Grief Show. In addition to Straight Up Health, on your screen, you should see a list of accessible resources you can turn to if you are in need or want to explore getting additional support for your mental health. Okay, I cannot believe that we have made it, but we are officially at the end of the show. From hearing inspiring words from our panelists to engaging in that mindful minute as a community and listening to our very knowledgeable youth storytellers, this has been such a special hour, and I'm so grateful to have been to share it with all of you. As a famous quote once said, all good things must come to an end. In our case, even though this show is ending, you can count on the fact that these conversations will not. No matter how you felt today or whether or not you resonated with this show, I hope you all took away something that will help you in whatever stage of life you are in now. And before we say goodbye and head to our last segment, I would like to extend a special thanks to all of the organizations and companies that helped us make today's show a success. Thank you to our supporters, including York University Faculty of Health, KBI Inspire Magazine, Retreat Candle Co., Straight Up Health, and Double Major. A special thank you to the Unsinkable founding partner, Good Life Fitness, as well as the Unsinkable champion partner, Sun Life Canada, and an extended gratitude to our sponsor for this event, Bubble Skincare. Lastly, a very special thank you to our producer and tech guy extraordinaire, the person who kept this whole thing running, Phil from Press It. Phil, maybe you can give us a hello. Hey, nice to see you. Thank you so much for everything. Everyone, round of applause for Phil. I hope you are all giving Phil a round of applause. He deserves it. All right, so in the spirit of ensuring awareness about grief continues, this is a reminder that our team will be sharing a post-show toolkit with all of the resources that we were speaking about during today's event and more. If you have any questions that went unanswered, please do reach out to us and we will make sure to include them in this toolkit. You should expect it in the coming weeks. Finally, because I wanted to make sure you all had something physical to take away from today's virtual event, I'm overjoyed to present to you the Grief Candle, which was created alongside Retreat Candle Co. You can head over to the website or scan the QR code on the screen to get your candle and support Unsinkable youth programs so we can continue to put together events like today. Now, I couldn't say goodbye without thanking probably the other most important person other than Phil, all of you today. It has been so fun and an absolute pleasure being your host, and I hope you enjoyed the event. And now, to celebrate, we have a very special performance from Double Major, an a cappella group from Vanderbilt University. Take care, everyone, and remember, you are unsinkable. Good night.
Those days we felt like a mistake. Those times when love's what you hate. Somehow we keep marching on. For those nights that I couldn't be there, I've made it harder to know that somehow we'll keep moving on.
There's so many wars we fought. There's so many things we're not. But with what we have, I promise you that we're marching on. We're marching on. For all of the plans we've made, there isn't a flag I'd wave. Don't care if we bend, I'd sink us to swim. We're marching on. We're marching on, we're marching on.
Doubts that swirl all around us, those lives that tear at the seams. We know we're not what we see.
Oh, for these dams will move with each other. There ain't no other step than one.
for all of the things I'm not.
We put one foot in front of the other. We move like we ain't got no other. We go when we go, we're marching on. There's so many wars we fought. There's so many things we're not. But with what we have, I promise you that we're marching on. We're marching on. We're marching on.